right, glad you're back with us. We're continuing our series on faith at work, and had a variety of jobs and folks, and have another school teacher. Just interviewed a school teacher on the last one that we did, but Kim Riggs is with us today, and to share about her job, her life, and her faith, and how her faith affects her job, and how her job affects her faith. And she's, I guess, not a dying breed, I guess, but I was going to say in the sense that she's been at one school her whole career. There's in just, I guess, in life in general, jobs transfer so much and move around so much. It's sort of a dying breed, but I guess there's some that still stick teacher-wise. But so anyway, give us a little bit about your education background. I know you grew up in Nederland, and most of a lot of these folks watching probably know that, but anyway, growing up in Nederland, and then your college, and then kind of how you got to back to PNG.
I grew up in Nederland and kind of wanted to be a teacher ever since, all kids kind of go through that. Well, I want to be a teacher, and I just kind of never grew out of it. So graduated from Nederland and went to Harding because my dad went to Harding, and so I went there and majored in math education. And then whenever I graduated from Harding, I came back, and Nederland actually wasn't looking. They didn't have any openings, and I actually had interviewed and signed a contract with Vider because PNG didn't have any openings either at that time. And then I got a call over the summer. I was in California with my parents because they had moved there, and I was in California, and the lady from PNG called me and said, hey, if you can get back this week, we can interview, you may have an opening. And so I flew back and interviewed, and
so
here I am.
If it was today, you could have done that on Skype probably.
Yeah, probably. But
so also, I guess
that
maybe people don't know you're like this close to being a Vider pirate, possibly. So,
just about. But
instead of a PNG.
Yeah, luckily I was able to get out of that contract, and they were able to find somebody else. So I didn't leave them hanging at the very end.
Also, another interesting thing I was thinking about this morning before we talked, which a lot of people probably mentioned before, but you're a Nederland Bulldog, like entrenched from your education, but now you've been a teacher in the PNG school district. How long have you been a teacher?
29 years.
29. I knew you were getting somewhat close to retirement, but
I just finished my 29th year.
So what's that perspective of rivalry of being half Bulldog and half Indian?
When I first started, the rivalry was a much bigger thing, and really became a much bigger thing whenever my students would find out that I went to Nederland, and they'd be like, oh yeah. And but now when they find out, I'm like, look, I've been here long enough to go through Nederland twice, so the transformation is complete. My kids went to PNG, and so.
Not as a weird thing.
Yeah, it's not as big a deal now.
Give us, I know you said, that's kind of interesting too, you wanted to be a math teacher in like high school, middle school, high school, and then as you went to Harding, or math education.
Math education.
So you stayed on that bus the whole time until you got to the, but give us a kind of idea of what you do on a normal day, kind of what classes you teach, what grades, and
for the past couple years, I've taught everything at the high school except for calculus and pre-cal. I haven't taught those. Of course, to teach calculus and to teach anything that's for college credit, you have to have a master's, and I don't have a master's. So anyway, for the past couple years, I've taught geometry, and but I taught math models for it seems like forever. But I've taught Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and I think that this next year I'm going to be teaching some Algebra 2 and some geometry.
So you have a variety of grades in high school?
I'll have a variety of grades, and even if you teach just one subject, you still end up having kind of a variety of students at different levels depending upon where they are so far as credits.
Oh, okay. So you see a lot of variety of folks.
You have a majority, like I will teach a majority of sophomores, but
as geometry.
For geometry, but I'll have some, either scale.
So how many in your? I know as a school you guys have big teacher meetings or whatever. But how many do you interact with? How many coworkers on ongoing basis? I mean, I know probably the math department.
Math department will, we actually eat lunch together every day. So there are about probably 5 or 6 of us that that will eat together and plan to eat together every day. And then probably maybe once a month, we'll have like actual teacher staff meetings where everybody goes. And the principal, runs those. But department meetings, we've had some since we've been shut down. Zoom meetings with either just math or math and science that we'll meet together.
Make sure everybody's on the same page somewhere.
Yeah.
All right, what a kind of a heads and tails question here. What's the thing you enjoy most about your job, and what would you say sort of enjoy least about your job? What would you say?
The thing I enjoy most is when you actually can see that kid, and not necessarily the kid that gets it every time, but when you can see that kid that has been struggling and has been working hard, and you're working with them, and when it finally clicks for them, that is, you just think, that's the reason I'm doing this.
The golden moment, yeah.
The golden moment. And probably the thing I enjoy the least is when you see that kid that has the ability, but just refuses to do.
For whatever reason.
For whatever reason, refuses to use the gift that they have.
And the tools.
That they just won't do it. And that if they just put in a little bit of effort, they could pass so easily. Or even when you see those kids that are just scraping by, and you're like, if you would just do a little
5%
bit.
5% more, yeah.
Yeah,
1% more.
You could be so much more successful, but they're just satisfied with the very bottom.
Yeah, I know when I had a kid, I think it was a 10-year-old coaching soccer, and you do all these little drills and stuff, and it doesn't really mean anything when you're doing the drill.
Right.
But in a game, one time he did a move and a move we had practiced and went and scored a goal, and he was like, yes. He was like, I said, that's the reason we practiced that move.
Right.
And he was like, yes. Like,
I got it.
So
yeah,
it's like, that's the reason we do these math
Exactly.
drills, or whatever.
Exactly.
So you can go, okay, boom, I accomplished this.
Exactly. Exactly.
That is very fulfilling. What kind of relationship in the local school there? What kind of relationship do you have with your boss, with your principal, vice principals, and how does that influence kind of y'all's chemistry as a?
For just a general classroom teacher, we probably build a closer relationship with our assistant principals than we do with our principal. So we build relationships with the principal that's in charge of our grade major, and then with like the person that's in charge of curriculum. And so we work.
Oh, your math curriculum.
Right.
Yeah.
We work closely with those two people. So far as administration, we'll go and see our principal and talk to him about different things if we need something, or if we have an idea, if we were like, hey, can we try this or whatever. But a lot of times, things that we need to accomplish and day-to-day basis, we work with our assistant principals.
Yeah, on a more local level, which is good that they don't get in your business.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of classrooms on that high school, so that the principal, has to be in on and
hands
stuff.
on them more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that kind of lays out what you do, kind of on an ongoing basis, day by day. What kind of shift a little bit towards your faith and how your faith affects your job affects your faith, as I said earlier. In your workplace, sounds like you work with your math department a little more closely, but are there other Christians in your workplace, and how does that influence, and how is that helpful on an ongoing basis?
It's helpful because when you work with them on a day-to-day basis, you kind of know where everybody is, and especially like eating lunch together, we know what's going on in each other's lives, and we can ask, hey, I've got this going on, and in my personal life, I've got this going on, and I need y'all to pray about it or whatever. And so that is helpful, even though we may not all go to, the same church. We all have that faith that we can call on each other for that. So that is helpful. There may be some others that are not believers, and so you don't corner them in some way. You let them do their job, and you don't try and because the school is not the place to try and pin that down. I will also have students that I know are believers, or that will come and ask me, personal questions, because you build that relationship with your students, and they'll ask me personal questions, and it may turn to something like that, and to some extent you can talk with them about things, but you can't use your position to try and sway them in any way. It's kind of it's a real delicate line that you walk.
And
with
I
a
mean, I
student.
think too, that's what sometimes as parents, you don't necessarily have to say, oh, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 20, it says
Right.
blah, blah, but you can say, hey, it's good to pray about everything.
Right.
You can use the principle rather than saying,
Exactly.
hey, here's the exact Bible verse. And let's
Exactly.
have a Bible study about it.
Exactly. You have to be really, really careful because of the law and what the law says as far as what you can use your position to do or not to do. But I mean, you can always see those kids that are struggling, and you can pray about it personally, because you get real invested in them throughout the year, and seeing some of those kids and what they struggle with it's kind of heartbreaking. So
do the kids, from the kids coming to your perspective, knowing that you're possibly knowing, in their cases, I say that you're a Christian teacher, to use that as a more generic term, do they sometimes come to you and say, hey, I need advice about blah, blah,
yes,
or okay?
I have had some kids that would come to me.
Because I know that you're a Christian, and I know that you'll give good advice. I mean, they don't say that. But
They
I'm
don't
just
say
saying
that, but
that's
they,
the underlying
and
little
I
bit.
think kids will go to almost any teacher that they feel comfortable with, and will ask for advice, or for
Help on something.
or I'm dealing with this or whatever. But then you have other kids that you find out, not necessarily from them, that you find out situationally, that are dealing with things and that don't want advice, and don't get into my business. So you kind of have to read the situation.
Yeah. Well, reading them for 29 years, you're probably become a pretty good reader.
Well, I mean, you think, but it's
sometimes
kind
it's
of
surprising.
Every year it's like, oh wow, I didn't know that was going on.
A new trend or a new
Yeah, exactly.
What in your environment, high school teacher, what are some temptations potentially of sin that you see, maybe that others face, maybe that you don't face as much, but just temptations in general for a high school teacher or a teacher in general?
The temptations for a teacher, from my perspective, are a little bit different from someone who works in the what we would call the public sector. I'm not tempted to, like, cheat on reports or do that kind of thing. My temptation is in judging kids, because it's very easy to reach a conclusion about a kid that may or may not be correct. So getting just one glimpse and deciding, okay, this is what's going on with that kid, this type of student, and that's hard, because it takes a little bit more effort to really kind of dig down and find out what's really going on with that kid. So judging is a very big problem that I deal with. I worry a lot about my kids.
You worry in the sense of getting to a grade, or worry in the sense of being successful?
Anything. It's very,
in life, sort of, or?
It's very frustrating. I've had years where I will just absolutely break down and start crying with the class when I'm talking to them. I was like, y'all don't understand how much, when I care so much more about how you're doing than you do, and I'm up here and I'm working so hard, and you're just kind of, whatever. And it's very, very frustrating, and I should not get as frustrated as I do. They're children, but I do get extremely frustrated, and that's something that I need to work on, is being a little bit more patient and more willing to build that relationship, rather than just go, okay, well, this is what's going on with that kid, and kind of.
So you ever have any of them come back later, whatever later is, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and say, I remember you being concerned about me, and now I realize that what you were saying, because I was an idiot back then, you know,
Well,
now I understand better that you were.
I will
had my best
have
interest at heart.
some kids come back, and then other kids that I see that I you know, that maybe I didn't build that relationship, and I'll see them come back and talk to other teachers, and you know, I will think, I missed that about that kid, and how did I not
Get more into
how did I not see that? And there's such a I don't know, a pressure, an expectation of teachers that we have to be watching for everything. We have to be able to tell when the kids are
Something's wrong at
being
home,
abused. We
something's
need
wrong
to
at
know
home.
when something's wrong at home. We need to know, and now the big thing is, you know, mental health, and are they suffering from a mental health issue? And it's difficult because a lot of these kids have been dealing with these things and have gotten very, very good at compensating and kind of covering up. So it's difficult to dig past that.
We're just
And
not
it's-
wanting to engage their
Well,
teacher,
and they don't want any attention brought to them, and it's difficult to get in there and get to a position where you can help in some way while still respecting, you know, them not wanting anybody there. And it's
not being too intrusive.
yeah, it's easier to just go, oh, okay, you don't want me in your life, so we'll just, you know, stay.
I'll teach math. And
I'll
you sit
teach
here-
math
sit
and
your
you
desk.
sit here, and it's easier to let that go on than to really get in there and dig into what's going on. And that's, you know, you kind of walk that line of where to stop too.
Curious question. Sheree is a coach, of course, but so she had a teacher perspective and a coach perspective. But I'm always curious of athletics. It's big in our area, and in the sense of temptations. I don't know if you've ever had. I mean, just in 30 years, so you're not necessarily saying it happened yesterday, but of athletics saying, hey, this is our star quarterback, or this is our star basketball player. He needs to pass geometry. You know, I know he's got a 50 right now, but you got to figure out some way to. So how do you deal with that?
I will usually, here lately, the instance that I'm thinking about was probably 20 years ago or more.
Yeah.
And so it was very odd because I had the parent coming to me, the guardian coming to me, and the coach, and they were kind of coming to me together, and I was like, I teach math, here are the numbers. And
Here's
so
what they made on the test.
yeah, I mean, I was
Great.
like, if you can get them to work a little harder, I'll be more than happy to work with them, to sit down with them.
Help
But
them-
I'm not
help them achieve,
changing. I'm not changing what they do. It's their grade, and you know, I'll work with them, but what they make is what they make.
Yeah.
And now our coaches are a little bit more proactive. They're not waiting until the end of the 6 weeks. They're
Trying to
very
get them up before the end.
they're very good going, where are they, you know, now, and what
What
do
do
they
they
need to
get
do,
before
and
they
do
do
I
it?
need to send them to you during our class period, because
some extra work.
if they don't do their work, if they're not successful, they can't help our program. And so
That's good.
they're better.
Yeah.
They're better
That
now.
helps. Definitely helpful. Sounds like. What in general too? I know you mentioned a couple of judging and some of those other temptations. How do you try to avoid those temptations? What's helpful? I know sometimes we're not always successful at avoiding our temptations, but
Yeah.
But what's kind of helpful to curb that a bit? Would you say?
I have a couple of colleagues that, you know, that I will sit down and talk to. Okay, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm thinking. You know, kind of help me see the other side. Help me, you know, remind me of what's going on, or what can I do to reach this kid, or you taught this kid last year. What did you do
that was
because
successful, yeah.
that they were successful? And so you kind of have to remember that they didn't just show up on my doorstep.
As a zero sum.
Yeah, they had to do something to get there, and so you kind of have to work backwards and say, okay, what's going on with this kid, and you have to call parents to say, here's what I'm seeing. And you have to realize that you're literally seeing a kid for 90 minutes every other day. You're not seeing the whole picture. And so you just kind of have to remind yourself. And that's hard in a lot of ways. Because like I said, it'd be easier to just go, okay, you've decided this, whatever.
Especially when you're seeing, how many students do you have?
I have about 115, usually around 115, 120.
So yeah, when you're seeing 120 of them, and each one of them is an individual story and life. Yeah, it could be.
And then I'll get emails, or I got an email from a student just at the beginning of all this COVID stuff, and she was like, I don't know if you remember me. I had you, 2 years ago, but you were really helpful, and I was like, wow, it was a kid that I didn't
remember particularly.
I remembered her. I remembered having
her,
her, but I didn't remember her story, or remember like actually making that connection, because you do connect with kids that you don't realize that you have that connection. It's kind of humbling, and it's like, okay, don't screw this up.
Well, and also it's edifying as a teacher to be able to say, I've had those as youth ministry kind of things, and you're like, oh wait, like especially with Facebook nowadays.
When they come back and say, hey, I appreciated this. You have to remember, there are kids, they're always watching. They're always there.
Yeah, and then you go, this is why I do
this. This is why I do this. Exactly. Kind of the last summarizing question I ask everybody in the interviews. How does kind of doing your best at your job, how does that kind of come out in the wash in the short term and the long term? Some people say, well, I'll cut a corner here, I'll cut a corner there, no one's going to know in the short term or whatever, but how does focusing and say, hey, I'm going to do my best, invest in this kid, invest in that kid, invest in all 120 kids, how does that helpful as a Christian in the short term, and also kind of 29 years perspective? As a teacher, if you cut corners, the kids will call you on it. And so that's, they know. And even though you may think you're doing something for just this one kid, or, I'm just going to do this, but don't tell they know, they will know. They will tell anybody and everybody. Exactly. And so you have to realize that you can't do that. And we used to say, a lot of times we'd be like, nobody, I'm very safe in my job because nobody wants my job. Nobody wants to do, once you get in there, nobody wants to do what you do. But you also have that, I have to do what can be replicated. Otherwise, I'll be stuck doing what I'm doing because they won't be able to replace me. So, there's some of those situations, especially like teaching certain classes. If you teach, I for a long time taught a lower class, I guess, academically, it's kids that struggled, and to some degree I was successful with them, with what we were trying to do and where we were trying to get them. And as a result of being successful with them, then I always got them.
You became that teacher.
I became that teacher, and it's it's gratifying in some ways, but it's also exhausting in some ways. So you got to kind of help everyone around you, your department wise. You have to help everyone get better to where they can kind of spread some of the joy around, and you can maybe move on to what's next, within your field,
or what's needed,
or be able to end up doing something different just to keep from getting burnt out, because it's very, very easy to burn out.
Yeah. Even though you have summers off, but
even with summers off, it's very easy to burn out, and I've seen teachers do it, and seen teachers that at some point you're like, you shouldn't be teaching anymore. It's done for you.
Burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, and I've always said that I'll continue teaching until I don't enjoy it anymore. or until or until I should not be in the classroom anymore.
So they send you out to
And
pasture.
yeah, and I've seen some of those situations where it's like I don't.
Almost had to force them out the door.
Yeah, it was like I don't need to be doing this anymore, but I'm still, I think I can definitely make it another year or two.
When are you due to retire, or when are you due to potentially retire?
After this next year, I will be eligible to
I know
retire.
there's kind of early retirement and then better retirement.
Yes, the longer I stay,
The better
I met
retirement
with
is
someone
better.
and they said, if you stay another, at this time it was like, if you stay another 7 years, and I was like, 7 years, gracious, I don't know if I can do another 7 years, but especially a year like this past one was
With all the
crazy.
online teaching.
The online teaching. Well, we had the flood, we had Imelda, we had the TPC
in the last
explosion.
3 years too.
We had
County Harvey in there.
and the explosion. We had a cyber attack on the high school. So there was a lot that hit PNG.
Under the radar, some
Just
of it a little bit.
yeah,
They all had
not the full area, but just PNG, and it was crazy. It's a little crazy.
Yeah, it's mentally enough for those that are a step away a bit.
Exactly.
But yeah, I forgot about the cyber attack.
Yeah.
Did they find out where that was from?
I don't know. I don't know.
They just had to fix it.
They just had to fix it, and we had to
Fix it
go
as fast
back
as
to taking attendance on paper and
For a
putting
little
it
bit.
out, and it was like I can't do on my computer, and so it was a little crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah. It was
All right.
very-
Well, any closing comments that we may have missed, or I know we covered a lot of area. Thank you for spending time with us
Sure.
today and sharing about your job and about your
Sure.
faith and how those things intertwine. Let's close with a prayer. Father, thank you for the time that I've had to visit with Kim and share her life with us and her job and her faith and to learn about those things. And it's always interesting to hear stories further about, as we sometimes know people's job on the surface and know about them on the surface a bit, but to hear some of the challenges that they face and how they handle those and navigate those. We're thankful for Kim and her heart for students, as she shared, still many years later, still trying to invest in each child, and thankful for her attitude and her effort. As she shared, sometimes all the teachers don't have those or have the students at heart, and just thankful for her heart for the students and to help them achieve what they need to achieve in our classroom and also achieve as individuals as they grow into adulthood, going through high school and moving towards college. Just thankful for her investment and continued investment in students and others who seek to be a light on these campuses, and pray that you'd help them to keep their light burning brightly and to encourage students and one another as she mentioned, her co-teachers. We're thankful for them and to be able to encourage one another through the challenges that we face, which today could be almost anything seemingly. Just pray that you'd help us to move forward working wise, as others have shared about their job, and help us to be a good Christian example, faithful example. Help us to follow Jesus as we go and to love you with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and seek to love our neighbor as ourselves. Just thank for Kim and her example, and pray that you continue to bless her and others that we know and love in their workplace and in their efforts. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.